Hi, I am Skyla Lee. I am going to read a story that I wrote last month. This story is about an interstellar quest for a human-friendly planet. Let's begin. Project Earth 2.0. What is 1 plus 1? I grumbled, rolling onto my side. Leave me alone! What is 1 plus 1? My eyes snapped open, ready to confront the one who had disturbed my deep, elongated slumber. A robot, slender, shimmering arms nudging mine, was positioned next to my bedside table. I was lying at the end of a cylindrical hall with two others. Highly advanced starship, designed for lengthy expeditions, I thought. The robot repeated its question in an adorable voice. What is 1 plus 1? The square root of 4. Correct. Software functioning perfectly well. The bot moved on to the next bed and questioned its residents. I let myself drift back to sleep. What is the name? I sighed, pushing myself up against the headboard of my bed. The robot, I decided to name it Starbot, loomed over me. Lothlorien, correct. Starbot leant back and gestured for me to follow it. We strode, at least I did, down the hall, entering a room with resting stations positioned along one wall and sofas along the other. Please select your appearance. Starbot pointed towards a mirror. The plaque above it had my name in bold orate lettering. I took on my usual look back at home. Who had reset my perfectly tailored face back to the original humanoid one? The ship robot led me through the starship. This one was utterly colossal, to a room bursting with identical uniforms with name tags. Cobalt starsuits? But those are for space, I thought. The left shoulder had a nicer patch, the right bearing a golden mockingjay gliding against a dark blue sky. Beneath the avian were the orate letters, Project Earth 2.0. Earth 2.0? Starbot didn't allow me to tally in the room. Swiftly put on your uniform and let's go! It shoved me towards what I assumed was the nose of the starship. I barely stifled a gasp as we entered the control room. Starbot tapped its claw-like fingers together, creating a dismissive click. Humanity's very first conscious AI wasn't too advanced, it noted. You may have lost data along the trip here. Let me introduce the control panel to you. There were 6, each for one robot, and apparently each were different. As we had consciousness, we trained in our preferred fields. I remembered my mother, the head of NISA, whispering to a colleague that the AI breakthrough experiments, as they called it, had led to us becoming much more like humans than our creators had intended to make us. We even required a handful of hours of sleep daily. I followed Starbot to the most immense control panel. This is ours! Featured on it were icons of my selected fields: linguistics for communication with potential aliens, and biology for any life forms. Beside them were a manual titled Tips on Being a Commander. I did remember my social skills being the best of the crew, but still shockingly low, which was presumably why NISA had put the manual there. After an hour-long tutorial of the control room, Starbot left me deeply immersed in the biology encyclopedia. It appeared I had forgotten a great deal of knowledge due to a colossal heap of major setbacks along the way. In fact, I thought it miraculous that my software had survived after Starboard's explanation of the trip. It wasn't too reliable, however. The bot's software had suffered too. I now lacked my previous ability to scan knowledge. I attempted to do so with the encyclopedia for 10 minutes before retreating to the cylindrical hall where my comrades were sleeping. We didn't require the troublesome sleep routine that humans needed. Why did they sleep so many hours? But we did 1, maybe 2 hours daily. If a human followed that routine, they'd meet the demise pretty soon. I reached the hall and peeked into the bed of my friend Eleanor, still asleep. Starboard gently pushed me aside to test Eleanor's software. What is 1+1? The humanoid yawned, rubbing her eyes with snowy fingers, and sat up. 2, obviously. What's her name? Eleanor, my name tag says it. She looked down and yelped. Where are my clothes and appearance? I told her a summary of Starboard's earlier explanation. It doesn't know how he got onto the ship, though, I finished. It only knows a detailed description of the ship, and that's where to find the seabird, write a report, and go back to Earth. So we're on a mission. We just don't know what it's for, or anything about what happened back on Earth about it. Eleanor restored her usual looks and suited up. Starboard led her to the control room whilst I worked at my control panel. Approximately half an hour later, I glanced up to see the front window displaying a colossal planet. Snowy clouds on its surface, Asia oceans covering about 2/3 of the crust, and lush rainforests taking over the entire supercontinent featured on the exoplanets. That was except for the icy poles. The screen instantly morphed to a 3D hologram of the planets. Third planet orbiting young yellow dwarf star Serenautlus, I murmured, finger tracing the words beside it. Right in the center of its Goldilocks zone. Gravity acceptable for humans, size slightly more colossal than Earth. Average global temperature 15 degrees Celsius. Name Serenautlus C. Summary exclusively similar to Earth. Eleanor, having her own hologram, turned to me. This is the perfect planet, she whispered. I nodded. We just have to wake Cairo up. She's the ultimate astronaut. What is 1+1? Starboard skirted around us to Cairo's bed. The humanoid stretched, her eyes widening at her reset appearance. No time! Go steer us to that planet! We led her to the control room. She gasped at the exoplanet and leapt toward the control panel, shaking with excitement. As the humanoid operated the panel, the ship began to rattle. She lifted her head. What's going on? I dashed to the very front of the starship and pressed my nose against the windshield. Behind me, Eleanor cursed softly as a book tucked into the lower level of a shelf slammed into her calves. As I leant even further, my stomach lurched when I glimpsed a colossal, monstrous planet with hideous features. A mere minute later, it came into full view, the fiberglass window shimmering plasma blue as it scanned and analyzed the bulging, malformed ball of rock. Second planet orbiting young yellow dwarf star Serenautlus, not in its Goldilocks zone. Gravity, highly unacceptable for humans. Size, thrice as big as Earth. Average global temperature inhabitable for sapiens. Name: Nautilus B. Summary: 0% human toleration. Oblivious of these words, Cairo worked, fingers as swift and furious whirlwind, as the starship began shaking uncontrollably. A ruby warning appeared on the screen, and the interior of the ship was bathed in scarlet light. Alarms blaring, objects released from the supposed locations, whistling through the air. Danger! Danger! Gravity of Nautilus B pulling starship into atmosphere. Mission critical. As Cairo reached for the final button, the ship's nose dipped at 45 degrees, breaking the threshold of Nautilus B's Roche limit, the point of no return for a stellar object. We managed to open a window and leaped out, parachutes slung over our backs. That's all for part 1. I will upload part 2 very soon. See you next time!